Hi, Marlene. It's very nice to have you here with me. And so we are having this series of talks with people that we believe are real contributors for a better world. So it's a pleasure and an honor to have you here. I'll introduce you, and if you want to complement, please feel free. So Marlene is she was awarded the President's Chair in Education and Knowledge Technologies at Ontario Institute of Studies in Education in the University of Toronto. And she's co-founder and director of the Institute for Knowledge Innovation and Technology. This is a network. I'm part of it. It's an international network that is really a big contribution. Do you want to complement something? It's very short because we don't have much time, but do you want to complement?
Well, just to say that your work has been really foundational and important to the network. And I was just honored with the inauguration into the Royal Society of Canada for the work that we collectively are doing. So I think that that's just a nice recognition for the team, the global team.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. So I was very impressed since the first time I went to Canada that you have a very diverse group, and so international. In this international group, you have in the University of Toronto, you have visitors. I was there many times, but you also go to many countries and stay. Sometime you came to Brazil a few times, and Canada was known, or is still known, by being very open to immigrants, to other cultures. And I know how rich and at the same time how difficult it is to work with other cultures, because everyone has his own values, habits, and pace of evolution. I would like to hear from you. How do you see our times now? Is it different from what has been along all these years, or do you see it's the same? Are changes happening in your perception?
Well, I certainly think change is happening because of the context within which we're all trying to work right now. So change, that has been written about, that are really difficult problems for society, these huge gaps in inequalities across financial education spectrums. And I think, of course, that hasn't changed so much as continued, but it gets exaggerated and magnified by problems such as a pandemic. And I think that the other kind of change is as people become aware of the climate crisis, there gets to be an angst amongst our, especially the young students and adolescents who just feel like they're inheriting a world that has so many major problems that they feel a bit disenfranchised. So I think those are important changes. I think having a global network that is so committed to the power of what students can do and uncovering capacities that, I think people quite underestimate the ideas and potential of what students can do. And so, that's a force on the other side. And I actually believe very much that what keeps this global team together is that we just work together, we see a vision of what's possible, understand very much that the changes that have magnified social problems are actually unsolved problems. But if you have education, that can deal with unsolved problems. You get a kind of energy. You get people that can deal with complexity, that can tackle problems because they know they're not alone. They know it takes teams, it takes distributed expertise, but they now have experience doing that. So I guess on one hand, I'd say the change is really difficult and the problem's huge. And on the other, I think that it's giving great strength to new educational models that can cope with that level of complexity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you talk about the potential of students participating in solving these problems, I know that you've been doing knowledge building since long time as an alternative to other ways of doing education. Could you comment on the relation or the difference on learning, deep learning, 21st century skills, and knowledge building, and why it's so important that we do knowledge building nowadays?
Sure. I think, if you project onto a substantial difference is this notion that schools, educational contexts of all sort could engage directly on in the means by which knowledge in the world is advanced. So if you study how expert teams work, it's not just that they have expertise, but through the very way they work together, they become increasingly expert in whatever they do. And so this notion of being able to tackle major problems, but work in teams using the different ideas that you have to come with this, you've got to learn to stay at the edge of what your community knows. And if you have an entire group of people needing one another, needing their expertise, like Cesar, I need you to take your physics knowledge and help me solve this problem because I don't understand it. You come together because you really need each other to address things. So that broad sense of belonging to a world that is able to advance knowledge for public good requires deep understanding. So it's almost like you take the broad goal for which you are striving, and then you engage in 21st century skills, you engage in inquiry. There's no way to tackle those problems without doing that. But the reverse oftentimes is we're going to teach all these independent skills, and then we have a sequence of activities and tasks to learn this skill and this skill. And but students don't get to see the big picture of why they're doing those tasks and activities. So from their perspective, they're really busy doing tasks and activities, and they don't see it as coming together to get close to what they're really concerned about. So this is just, in a sense, saying, let's tackle how do teams really work when they are dealing with unsolved problems, when they are dealing in complex situations, and enculturate students into such communities. So then, of course, people say, yes, but of course, they've got to learn all the basics before they would ever be able to tackle big problems. But if you think about it and look at a lot of how the basics are taught, they're taught in such a way so disembedded from things that are meaningful that a lot of students don't get to the basics. And this is just saying, hey, you can teach that alphabet by bringing together different sounds, by different people contributing different pictures. I'm being kind of silly here, but my point is that, we so have bought into the notion that complex knowledge work is what happens later in education. And so we have years and years where students really, many students don't quite see why they're doing all these tasks and activities. And so we lose a lot of the power and potential of students' ideas. So it's really taking a large commitment to bringing the direct kind of workings of expert teams in from the very beginning of schooling. And we have like zero evidence that suggests the students do more poorly and don't learn the basics. I would say it really gives them a reason to want to read. I want to read because you just helped me and you gave me something, and you it's for me and to deal with my problems. So I actually really want to read that text, or I want to get my idea out there because somebody else is going to help. So creating that meaningful context drives these other initiatives. And all the data we have suggests that students can actually exceed expectations, not just meet expectations. So
Yeah. One thing that I love in the way that you approach this is you created those 12 principles. That is a way to organize the process. And among the principles, you have, for instance, idea improvements, you have idea diversity, democratic participation, epistemic agency. And for me, sorry, it keeps closing my camera. I'm not doing it. And these principles, for me, they are principles that we have to use all the time in life. So in this sense that the knowledge is not not my idea. So we have a word that is so individualistic that I have to progress. I have to have a better career. And when students participate in this collective knowledge building for advancing collective knowledge, I think these kind of principles, they prepare students for democratic life. How do you see the connection of participating in the democratic worlds and living this process while they are students? So do you think it's intentional? It's something that's these students are better prepared, not only as knowledge builder, but also in terms of emotions and see others and think as a group. Just your ideas on this connection.
The principles actually came out of the study of expertise and knowledge innovation. So, like just decades of studying how do these teams that stay on trajectories to knowledge for public good. Of course, there are expert teams that are not committed to public good. There are terrorists that you might say get to be expert teams, but they're not expert teams for public good. But, there are fascinating studies of what actually happens in these Nobel laureate labs. How do teams that consistently invent new things, how do they work? So there's a really rich literature on expertise and knowledge innovation. And so the principles were really trying to capture the essence of what happens in contexts where people can stay on trajectories for sustained creative work with ideas. And I think the socio-emotional piece that happens when you feel your ideas are important, when other people build on your ideas, when you see you mentioned a principle of improvable ideas, when you get this sense that ideas can be improved, and you are part of the energy that improves those, it takes away some of the angst that students get of, did I get it right? Dare I put up my hand? What if I get it wrong? I'm going to be embarrassed in front of my group. But if you have this other sense that you're putting out an idea and it's going to be improved, and that is actually part of the energy, it's not a world of right, wrong. The discourse isn't judgmental. You say something and I'm trying to think, am I going to pass you or not? Are you going to fail? You get this sense that taking risks is important, and you get a sense that is something that democratizing knowledge, that it's part of my contribution is also helping other people. So you get a whole community that is committed to shared goals that they're moving forward. And you just, I think, get a sense of, actually, one of the studies where they were just doing the looking at the kinds of words students use, it's kind of a sense of confidence. It's a sense of belonging. It's a sense of, in many cases, joy, like there has been a discovery. So students express how important they feel the work is, and that they were really surprised, and that was really fun, although it was pretty scary and I wasn't sure we were going to get there. So from there, what they say, you get a sense of the kind of engagement that has a positive emotional emphasis. And I think that that's part of what we saw in these teams. They really, it's exciting to discover things. It's, and there are going to be long times when there's no discovery. You don't even feel like you're on the right track. It's just feels like, I don't know, it really actually is kind of miserable for a while, but then you break through with something and you get back on a path. So you learn that it's not always positive and up, and isn't this fun? It's really hard. I remember one child said, boy, I guess if people were looking at us laughing, they would think it's all easy. But I tell you, it's not easy. This was just a very young child. So I just to answer your question more specifically, I think if in fact we can address working with ideas the way people do, if they keep ideas on growing trajectories, it brings with it the socio-emotional dynamics that I think are what sustain teams in creative work with ideas.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you are one of the creators of CSIO, it's Computer Supported Intentional Learning Environment that evolves to Knowledge Forum. You have been developing technologies for collaboration, for making it visible for people, how they participate and inspire each other. All these things that you were talking is happening, supported by technology. And when we go to advancing knowledge for public good, it's so complex, so hard that we think, oh, you need politics, you need expertise, you need people that are living this thing. So it's so complex that I believe technology and the way that you produced has a big role on changing things, as an enabler to make it happen. Could you comment on the role of technology, what you developed, and how do you believe it is important in creating communities and connecting communities? Please tell a bit about the technology that you were so fundamental to create.
Yeah, actually, it was Cecil was developed before the internet. So it's actually been quite a long time that we have been doing this. But the idea was also, if these principles were embedded in the way people work with ideas. So I put an idea into a public space, and that's a design space, and other people can build on that idea. But then there's also a way to rise above, so you create a higher level integration of ideas. Like if you could have technology that is favorable to the very conditions that the principles were set out to identify, then rather than having expertise and innovation as the small slice of the population that is typically associated with expertise and innovation. So, who knows what the number is, but maybe 10% of the population is expected to be the real knowledge creators, innovators. If you could make those kinds of engagement commonplace, which was why the technology was trying to say, if you engage that way, you will just develop the kinds of dynamics that help sustain these ideas. So we've tried within the technology, you can write your ideas, or you could create an audio node or multimedia. The idea is that we should be able to engage all students, even from the youngest of ages. But one of the things that came clear very early on then was that students just were writing and reading a whole lot more than they were in other classrooms. So I don't know if you know Arthur Appleby and Judith Langer. They were the head of the, I'm not quite sure what the formal name was, but the National Center in the US for Writing. And they were saying, oh my gosh, you are getting so much more reading and writing at these early ages than we're getting at high school. And that's because so much of school writing and reading is taking information from the board, looking at a text and trying to create a report by what they call the copy delete strategy. That this notion of productive language that's trying to advance ideas, then is pretty rare. And what they were seeing was we were getting so much more of that and so much more writing. So that was part of what I was referring to as this engagement in things that are meaningful help drive the basics, as opposed to assuming they need to come first. But back to the technology, I've come to think of it actually as almost more a design space than a technology, because we haven't from the beginning been like, I'm not a technology person. Most of the people we work with are not technology gurus, so that, it would not have the finest interface by any means, that if we were going to study interface design, but it keeps changing because we keep finding more powerful ways. So it itself is a design space. How, the more we understand of expertise, can we engage students at all levels in these kinds of activities? The technology, so when I say a design space, and I really am talking about this notion that in order to create new knowledge, you've got to get this sense that ideas need to live beyond your mind. That is, learning is really about personal changes in understanding. But knowledge creation requires that my ideas don't just stay in my head and I'm not just doing really well, but I'm giving them over to society and somebody else can build on and improve those ideas. So ideas have a public life. So the technology gave students very early on a way to put their ideas out there for other people to see them. As soon as the internet came along, then we just had this marvelous ability to connect with schools. So it was like the principals really helped us actually build the first environment that was for collaborative learning. But it helped us actually then extend to the more global context, because with the internet, those very conditions that made it powerful for a local community to connect made it powerful for multiple teams to connect. So for us, it was pretty easy. And actually, the same with COVID, when all the schools were shut down and there was just this kind of, what do we do, because we don't have any of the affordances to stay together and we're not together. For us, it was actually more people join the community, because this notion of face-to-face interaction combined with getting your ideas out in the world, it's actually enhanced by global, more extended teams. So the technology has helped us try to understand the process of knowledge creation embedded in environments that support students, and it's been a real critical component. Like, I think the theory, the practices, and the technology are all of one piece. Each keeps ratcheting up the other. So I think without that integration, it's very hard to stay the course of education for knowledge building or education for knowledge creation.
Yeah. Coming back to technology, we know that in this era of some call it post-truth, we have these narratives that were able to connect people at the national level. We always had that, but in the times of technology now, we have narratives that could be called adaptive fictions, such a way that you adapt it to different groups, and you can influence groups in different ways. So when you have so many fake news, like was done by Donald Trump or Bolsonaro here in Brazil, what they create is a sense that I don't know what is true, and I have nothing to believe. Then I will believe in things that are more connected to my reality. And this point, these adaptive fictions are very important, because then you get the people because they don't believe in science, don't believe in truths built in this sense that we are talking, because this is a slow process, it's fragile, because all the time we are evaluating and saying it's not the final truth. And when someone comes to you and say, this is the final truth, it's very simple, this is the way. So it's very hard to compete with this movement that is happening, because we have these new technologies in social networks and adaptive. Do you have any suggestion, or this is our final question. So just what would you say for people that are living this difficult reality, where we have all the power of collective intelligence, but also the power of collective stupidity? How to counterbalance? What would you suggest?
Well, I think one of the things that feels the strongest about the work with the knowledge building and the affordances of the technology or ability to design is, some people talk about the infodemic. That is, that information gets out on social media to the point that you don't know what is true and not true. And so it creates this infodemic. But actually, if you live in communities that are committed to advancing ideas, then whatever that idea is, that is the source of the infodemic, somebody's going to say, but I read something that doesn't fit with that. Or where would you put this? You get this kind of, but I see something different. You see, you're in a community. It's not just you and your ideas that are going out and I'm blaring them out to my group and then that group to their group. And it's like a pathway that is ever expanding out there. And I think it's the big difference between social media that is not configured for idea improvement. It's configured for, well, it's called social media because it's the social networks. And we've been working very hard to make sure that the social networks are also idea improvement networks. And that means that people have a respect for alternative perspectives, that you start to learn that there are going to be lots of different perspectives. And so you really have a commitment to working with them and understanding. You started talking about immigration. And I think one of the real strengths is that you have different people's perspectives. They have, like one of the principles is constructive uses of authoritative sources. And students just, oh, but what does the text say? Oh, where is the evidence? It's just part and parcel of what you learn to do when you are committed to improving ideas. So I actually think of our work as a counter to infodemics. That is, it really engages people. We even find students, they will find a text that is beyond their readability level. But since they so believe and work together, they say, okay, I found something, I think we've really got to understand this, but I need some help. So the text itself becomes the object of discourse and their work together. So I think what people find hard is that communities would really work this way. We find it harder that people aren't working hard to get communities that work this way, because they're just splendid and they're wonderful communities to create, but you need to believe in it. And I think you also need to put together the kinds of conditions that have students not just in cliques, like just not, here's my perspective and I connect with the people that have my perspective, but it's really not the way knowledge in the world is advanced. It's not the way we're going to be able to make a difference. And so I think once students understand that, the community becomes a counterforce for different cliques. They become a force that tries to bring the best of what they understand. They're quite used to going out into the world to look for evidence, to look for counter positions, to look for, well, what are people who are really out there making big advances? What are they saying? What are they doing? It's just bringing that kind of information into the discourse. And they say knowledge creation is in the discourse. You come up with new distinctions, you break through with new understandings. And so it's just a counter force to these difficulties created by media that have information blared out to the world, but without the constructive rethinking that is necessary to stay the course of knowledge creation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. I think it's a good contribution for our group also to think here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for just keeping head up in these troubled times and trying to bring together things that will be helpful for teams. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And actually, it's just wonderful to have Brazil as part of this network. So I thank you.